Sup y'all, so this is my first video on my channel to be about my faith, so we'll see how it goes. I'm gonna tell you right now, I took so many takes of this and it's been a while. But anyways, as a kid I was always confused as to why Jesus told us to turn the other cheek. You know, I knew he was big on forgiving, and so does a lot of people. Even people outside of the Christian faith know that Christ is huge on forgiving others. In fact, there are many allusions to turning the other cheek outside of the Christian faith. But little me wasn't having it. Little me was like, Lord, Mr. Jesus Christ, sir, if someone else touches me, dude, it's a wrap. They're getting 1-2 Mayweather, 3-4 McGregor, But, eventually I accepted it. I was like, I'll keep it up here. And I know that Christ tells us to turn the other cheek. And I kind of ignored the why. I never dug into that. I was just like, okay, whatever you say. And, that's faith. But let's go into the why. To go into the why, we have to first find the verse where it was said. Little me did not know, because little me read it from the children's Bible, but big me looked it up, or found it. The verse comes from Matthew 5:38-42. You have heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Now let's give some context. In Matthew 5, Jesus was just kind of going off, he was like preaching, He even goes off on a tangent in verses 5-11 and says, blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And he kept this parallel for 6 more verses. And then he goes on to basically take the teachings of the Old Testament and go above and beyond. In verse 27-28, he says, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. Don't commit adultery, y'all. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Later on, in verse 31 and 32, it has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. And here, instead of an eye for an eye, he says, turn the other cheek, which is above and beyond in 2 ways. Well, first, you're not slapping them back. Second, you're not just walking away. Forgiving somebody would be walking away and not hitting them back. But he goes beyond forgiving. He says, turn the other cheek. And it took me a while to find out why he tells us to go above and beyond. Why is he telling us to be better than what the Old Testament taught us? Maybe it's because God sees who you are on the inside, not just who you show to others. You can't hide from God. Adam and Eve tried it. They got caught. And then I realized, Christ told us to turn the other cheek for 2 reasons, I think. One is explicit. One of them was, he says in verse 46, if you love those who love you, what reward would you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? So he wants to separate those who listen to him from those who don't. He wants to separate the righteous from the sinners. Or You know what I mean. And I think another reason why is because God turned the other cheek for us. He didn't just forgive us, He turned the other cheek for us. You know, Adam and Eve were given everything. You know, God was like, here's everything, or basically everything, and you can do whatever you want, just don't sin. Don't eat from the tree of good and evil. And they traded everything away for something less. Eve was like, you sneaky God. Serpent over there told me that if I eat from the tree of good and evil, I'm gonna be as smart as you. And she ate it. And then she convinced Adam to eat it. And that's when things went downhill. And in doing so, Adam and Eve sinned. They did what was unforgivable, basically. You know, they did what was unholy, and that's why they got kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And from then on, all of the descendants have sinned. We have all strayed away from God. We have all done what God has told us not to do. And for a holy God like Him, that's supposed to be unforgivable. That's a huge thing. It's not like a lot of us don't make a big deal out of sin, but to Him it's a huge deal. And He doesn't just forgive us. He sent His Son down to die for us. You know, His Son was basically, or was, tortured. You know, nails are gonna hurt a lot if you didn't know. And forgiving would have just been, you know, you did what you did, now you face your consequences, but I'm not gonna do anything, you know. But He said, I want you guys back here with me. So He turned His other cheek. And He got hurt even more. For us. And to be honest, I should have known this already. But we'll go into that later on. Later on, in one of Jesus' parables, in Matthew 18:21-35, He gives a better example of this. In verse 21, Peter asks Him, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? And Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Which, He's just saying, keep going. You know, He's not saying, okay, count off at 77. You're done. He was saying, keep going. Not just 7, 77. Not just 77, 777. And He goes into the parable. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all he had be sold to repay the debt. At this, the servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I will pay back everything. The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servants fell to his knees and begged him, be patient with me and I will pay it back. But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could repay the debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called the servant in. You wicked servant, he said, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servants just as I had on you? Or just as I had on you? Because that's a question. In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he could pay back all he had owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your hearts. I mean, I don't really know what to say. That kind of gives a good idea of what Jesus means when he turned his other cheek. He turned his other cheek for us, so we should turn our other cheek for anyone who sins against us. And in the parable, the servant owed the master gold, a lot of gold. But the servant's servant only owed the servant. I know that makes sense. Don't even try to comment. That makes sense. The servant's servant owed the servant silver. We did what was unforgivable and punishable to God, and he did the impossible and forgave us. Anyone who sins against us, their sin isn't as great as the sin that we have done against God. I don't know about you, but I sin every single day. Other people, they don't sin against me every day. You know, I don't know about you, but I'm social distancing, I'm sheltering in place. But even if I'm not, I don't interact with people as much for them to sin against me every single day as I sin against God every single day. Yet God still forgives us. So why can't we forgive them? And not just forgive them, why can't we turn the other cheek? And I think at first I said I should have known this already. The reason is because Christ actually alluded to this when he taught us the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Again, we sinned against God, we trespassed against God, and he forgave us. And we should forgive those who trespass against us. Now we know why he says turn the other cheek. But what do we do with it? You can watch all this just to know why Jesus said that, because at the end of the day, it's the results that matter. How do we apply this though? Now that we know why that Jesus said this, how do we apply it to real life? Honestly, I don't think you can. Really, to be honest, you can't apply it to a specific situation. Like, if someone does slap you in the cheek, I don't think you're really gonna actually turn the other cheek. But we can use it to change our hearts. I said earlier that I kept it up here. So how can we keep it here instead, in our hearts? Again, in the frame, in here. And we continue to have the mentality that, God forgave us, turn the other cheek, so we should turn the other cheek then. And we keep on putting it into perspective, then our hearts will be changed. And I think once our hearts will be changed, then naturally every situation from then on will be different. I can't give you a certain situation right now because I can't think of one. But if you change your hearts, automatically every situation thereon will be changed. Because if you're different, what you do will be different. It all starts from here. Everything that flows around you flows through your heart. And that's true. Like medically, that's very true. All your blood goes through your heart and then goes out to your body. So the big takeaway, I guess, to sum it all up, is Christ tells us to turn our cheeks because that's what he did for us. He wants us to do it for them, especially since when he turned his cheek for us, he took some big strikes. Like, remember, y'all, that's that's gonna hurt. And he forgave what was unforgivable, you know? We turned away from such a holy God, and we don't deserve such a holy God now because we've sinned. Yet, this holy God who has not sinned wants us up there. Heaven was reserved for those who are sinless. And he turned his other cheek. He used his blood to wash over our sins so that we could be with him. And if you put that into perspective of somebody, you know, not paying you back $10 or something, it's really not a big deal. In fact, no sin against you on this earth could be greater than the sin that we have done against God. You know? I mean, Job lost almost everything, and he still didn't curse God. So just keep it into perspective. Okay, y'all, thank you for listening to my TED Talk. I had a question to ask y'all, just to get your inputs, but I forgot it, so I'm just gonna close it off here. Bam, what? Oh, there's nothing